Hi everyone. Today we're going to continue our investigations on living organisms. What I have in front of me looks like a plate filled with dirt, but I have a living organism inside of there. I have some worms, some night crawlers crawling around inside. Now what I want to do today is I want to ask the question, what environment do worms like to live in? Well, let's think about that. We know that they like to live underground. They like to live in the soil. But is that what they really prefer? We're going to ask a few questions. Do they really prefer the soil? Or would they be okay in another earthy environment? Maybe the sand. We'll compare soil versus sand and see which they prefer. We'll also ask the question whether they like to be in environments that are moist, that are wet, or environments that are dry. Let's get started. Before we get started, I wanted you to take a look at these worms. Going to pick them up with a popsicle stick and move them around just so you can see what they look like. They're all intertwined and entangled into one another. But now you can see a little bit better what their shapes look like. And you can kind of see how they like to squeeze and open, kind of like an accordion. That was pretty cool watching them move, right? So what I've done here is I have a plate. I have white sand on one side and some dirt on the other. What I'm going to do is place some worms in the middle, and we're going to watch and see if they have a preference as to which side they go to. So far, 5 minutes have passed, and it looks like they are leaning towards the soil. I don't see any of them near the sand. Let's give it another 5 minutes. Looks like one is trying to go in the sand. Let's see if he likes it. He's trying. Well, 15 minutes have passed, and worms are slow. Yes, they are. But there are none in the sand. And all of them have come to the one side where the soil is. One of them did try to go here and got some sand on its nose, but didn't like it, and it went back the other way. Our first experiment to see what environment worms prefer. We see the worms prefer the soil, not the sand. I had 6 worms in the middle, and I put soil on one side, sand on the other. Had to wait some time, about 15 minutes, but pretty obvious. They all went to the side of the soil. What environment do they prefer? Soil. Now, I want to ask another question.
Do they prefer wet soil or dry soil? Let's do another experiment.
For this part, now I have some dry soil on the right, and I have added a little bit of water. You can see it's wet to the soil on the left. Again, I'm going to add my worms to the middle, and we'll see which environment they prefer now. So this time took a little bit less time, but look at where they all ended up, all but one. I'm gonna move him out of the way. I'm not sure if he's awake, but if we look, they are all on the wet side. None of them went to the dry soil.
We did another experiment with the worms. We tested to see if they prefer dry or wet environment. And this was really a lot easier for them to choose. They loved the wet soil so much more than the dry soil. All but one went to the wet side. The one in the middle didn't move much, so I'm still wondering if he's asleep, taking a nap. Maybe he'll wake up later and decide. But most of them did like the wet soil. What does that tell us about the worms? Where can we find them? Do you think we can find them in a sandbox? No, they didn't like the sand. Do you think we can find them in the soil? Oh yeah, they loved it. Where are we most likely to find them? Wet soil or dry soil? That was easy too, the wet soil. Worms prefer to be in wet soil as opposed to dry soil, and they prefer the soil over the sand. This was a little experiment just to learn about animal behavior. What other questions do you have about the worms? What other questions do you have about other animals? These worms, I'm going to return them back to their home where they can tunnel back underground and continue to live. If you have access to worms from your backyard or from the pet store, you can go ahead and try this experiment at home.